Let me ask you a question. How many people in the audience know what the phrase RSVP stands for? I'll give you a hint. We see it on invitations, weddings, dinners. Many people don't understand or realize that this word, or this phrase rather, comes from the French language. Répondez s'il vous plaît. Respond, please. And that's the thing. We hear and carry little parts and pieces of other languages and other cultures with us all the time without even realizing it. And one of those pieces for me happened to be French. I was 12 years old in the sixth grade. The teacher walks in and immediately starts to ramble. And as I looked at the discomfort in all the other faces, all I could think about was, wow, I want to sound just like her. I don't know what she's saying, but I know I want to communicate in that capacity. But life happened, college, grad school, adulting, right? Bills. And it'll be more than 20 years before I revisited the language and revisited that same feeling that I felt when I was 12 years old. And not because I had to, I didn't need it for work. I technically could get by with bonjour, j'espère que vous allez bien, ça va, merci. That's all. I did it because I wanted to. And that decision of revisiting something that I once knew changed my life. Now, why language learning? My name is Dr. Henry Henderson, and I am not a linguist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a cancer biologist. I'm trained to understand and communicate the nuances of a disease to better help patients. But I realized something. My journey with language learning and what I did every day for work were actually a lot alike. They both involve complex systems. They both were a lot of mess, very vulnerable, and you have to kind of be crazy to take them on. But what I learned about myself in that process was I was becoming a better listener. In the process of messiness and uncertainty, I was learning to be more present. And for me, it wasn't about mastering the grammar. That's really important when you're learning another language for sure. But it was about becoming more empathetic, more productive, and gaining a perspective that I never imagined. It didn't only make me more fluent in another language, it made me more fluent in life. And tonight, I want to share with you how learning another language or revisiting one maybe you stopped after high school in Spanish too, picking it back up can make you more fluent in yours. And I'm not going to give you the tips and tricks on how to learn a language in 60 days. That's impossible for some. But I want you to understand how jumping into something new or revisiting something you once knew can shift how you see yourself, others, and the world. Now, of course, let me nerd out really quickly. Let's start with the science. We know that when you're learning another language or if you speak multiple languages, your brain is becoming stronger every single day. And that applies to everything, right? If you're learning how to cook for the first time or maybe even play soccer, you're growing your brain muscles. But beyond the science, here's what that feels like. You're building a presence, right? And what is this guy talking about there? You're building a presence. You start to notice the nuances in the body language and the gestures of the other person. Maybe they didn't mean to say that. Maybe they meant to say something else, but they're not using their words. You're noticing their body language. And that presence that you're building in that moment, in that cafe, in that library, maybe on the metro, that doesn't stay with you just there. That carries over to your work, your relationships, both platonic and romantic, and even in your life. Now, I mentioned empathy. What does that have to do with learning another language? I want to give you my favorite quote of all time. If you speak to a man in a language that he understands, it goes to his head. If you speak to a man in his language, it goes to his heart. Nelson Mandela. I had the privilege of traveling to Dakar, Senegal, a country in West Africa, to meet my French teacher and to immerse myself in the Senegalese culture. And if you're not familiar with this country, Senegal, it is a country in West Africa, of course, and Wolof is the most spoken language. This language, however, lives in unison with other languages in the country as well. The interesting part is that French is the language of medicine, education, government, and business. And actually, when you think about it, and we know this for sure, that French is not spoken mostly in France, it's spoken on the continent of Africa. Now, when I was there, they didn't care if my French was choppy. I only knew four words in Wolof. They only cared that I took the time to connect with them. They only cared that I took the time to communicate with them because we think that everyone speaks English when we go places, and that's not the case. That also could have been because Senegal is known as the land of Teranga, which in Wolof is synonymous with generosity and kindness. Could have so they could have just been nice, but in that moment, I felt like I wasn't just a tourist. I felt like I belonged. There was another moment where I visited a well-known bookstore in Paris. I walked in, I asked the clerk, "Do you mind if I speak French with you? Because I'm learning and I really want to perfect it." She looks at me and said, "Of course, because I don't speak English." Imagine if you walked in somewhere and no one understood you, and vice versa. That taught me something. That empathy is more than just a feeling. It's a practice, it's a choice. And learning another language and using that language with the cultures and the people who speak it is one of the best tools that we have to practice that, to practice empathy. Now, all the empathy in the world can't distract you from the fact that learning a language and trying to speak that language is actually kind of hard. I froze mid sentence, I've totally went blank, and that's okay. Because in those moments, it's teaching us a lesson. And what lesson is that? It's okay to not know. Have you ever been sitting in class and you go through a lecture and the professor says, "Any questions?" You don't say anything right now, but when you get home, you realize you had no idea what was going on. That's the same thing with languages. It's the same thing. You learn how to keep showing up even when you feel uncertain. You learn how to be confident through vulnerability. And how does this translate to life? You're learning how to be confident through that vulnerability, but that doesn't stay right there. It goes through your work presentations. Maybe you want to ask that pretty girl out or that pretty guy or whomever you choose. But that confidence is built through those moments. Another thing that's really, really interesting when you start to learn or want to learn another language, you want to understand the different cultures that speak it. Maybe you want to go to Mexico and order those tacos, and they'll give you extra sauce if you say gracias really well. Or maybe you want to go to France or Paris, like me, and order that croissant very confidently. In these moments, you're learning that the way that we love and celebrate and cry and grieve, we do all these things the same across different cultures, across different peoples, but we do them in different languages. You start to realize that the way that you grew up isn't the only way to live. I had the privilege of giving a seminar, a cancer seminar, to Francophone healthcare workers who wanted to better their English. Francophone just means French speaking. I realized that the way that we talk about cancer screening here is different than they talk about it in Senegal, in Cote d'Ivoire. I realized I had to become more culturally competent, more culturally aware, more culturally sensitive. The way that I adapted that showed me that I can't have the same conversation with person A like I have it with person B. This adaptation to culture and the sensitivities of those cultures helped me in my everyday relationships. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that learning a language is super, super easy because sometimes it's not. But I did realize that this process made me more reflective and more patient. It made me a better scientist. It made me a better communicator. It made me more culturally grounded. If you don't leave with anything else tonight, I want you to leave with one thing. You don't have to be fluent to feel the impact. Not at all. Learn a few words, pick up Duolingo. If you use Duolingo, you know it reminds you when you've missed a couple of lessons. Pick it back up. Let someone hear you use them because when you speak someone else's language, especially when you're in their country, you're saying, "Hey, I see you, I hear you. I want to meet you halfway or however close I can get." And that act of reaching outside of yourself is very brave because in the end, we think the language is about the fluency. We think it's about the words, but it's about building bridges. It's about presence, it's about connectivity, it's about empathy. If I ask you three words, or if you ask me three words rather, to sum up my experience, I would say empathy, of course, productivity, and perspective. Learning another language not only taught me how to show up for myself, it taught me how to show up for my mom when she's in Paris and now she has a translator son, but it also showed me how to show up in all my other relationships as well. I'm better at work. I'm better in my relationships with my friends. I'm better with my dogs when we're taking a hike. I'm a better human being. And if you allow it, learning another language or revisiting that language that you stopped in 10th grade can make you a better person too. Thank you.